I'm not afraid to admit, I am obsessed with 69 basketball scores. It didn't used to always be this way. It all started back in February 20th, 2020 to be exact, when I went to a University of Colorado versus University of Southern California basketball game. It was a pretty normal game until late in the game when CU took the lead 69-66. In that moment, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if both teams tied at 69. Would that be the nicest game of all time? In the end, it didn't happen. CU won the game 70-66. But walking home that night from the game, I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if that game had ended up at 69. Has that ever happened? I knew deep down that of all the college basketball games, there had to be at least one that ended up being tied at 69-69. So from that day forward, I made it my mission to find every 69-69 game I could. When I'm talking about 69-69 games, I'm not talking about games that were tied at any point at the score of 69. I'm only talking about games that were tied at 69 either at the end of regulation or overtime. Basically, 69 has to be embedded within the box score. Let me explain. This game is not a 69-69 game. Even though it was tied at 69, this basket to make the score 71-69 before the end of regulation means that it's not a 69-69 game. This game, however, is a 69-69 game because this basket to send the game to overtime tied the game at 69-69 at the end of regulation. These are the type of games that I'm looking for. Perhaps the greatest appeal of 69-69 games is that they are largely distinct to college basketball. Baseball, soccer, and hockey are all way too low scoring to get to that number of points. The nicest score that you can possibly get might be 6-9. It is technically possible in the NFL, but it would have to be an insane game to happen. Both teams scoring 69 points would be a true scoregami. And finally, 69-69 games have happened in the NBA, especially in the past. However, as the NBA has become more high scoring, we've virtually seen the death of 69-69 games at the pro level. That really means college basketball is the last holdout of 69-69 games. In front of you are all the college basketball games in the last decade that were tied at 69-69 either at the end of regulation or in overtime. In total, there's only 180 basketball games, each of them with unique players, events, and stories. However, today we will only be focusing on a few of those stories. Before we get to the individual games, I want to put that number of 180 into perspective for you. In the last 10 years, there's over 55,000 college basketball games, meaning the odds of you going to a 69-69 basketball game were about 1 in 312. To put that in a frame of reference for you, the odds of you attending a no-hitter in the last decade before coronavirus were about 1 in 623. Meanwhile, the odds of your death being from falling are about 1 in 218. So basically, seeing a 69-69 game falls somewhere between the odds of you falling to your death or you witnessing a no-hitter. That's pretty cool. A majority of 69-69 games were in conference play, meaning they happened between two teams in the same conference. In fact, 125 of the 180 games were in conference play, which is roughly 69% of 69-69 games. Very nice. Looking at this scatter plot that shows all college basketball conferences, with the x-axis showing total number of games, and the y-axis showing the number of 69-69 games. Standing out high in the middle is the Big Sky Conference, which had 8 69-69 games. As you can see on this graph, that means that the Big Sky had the highest rate of 69-69 games of any conference. However, what I'm more curious in is the polar opposite of the Big Sky Conference, the Horizon League, which was the only conference to not have a single 69-69 game in conference play. Although they didn't have an in-conference 69-69 game, a few Horizon League teams did have a game out of conference. One of those games was Wright State versus Idaho, which has a finish you have to see to believe. We joined the game with 1.1 seconds remaining. Idaho is down by 3, and they need to go the full length of the court in order to potentially tie it. They, quite simply, needed a miracle.
Tie it up. Throws the ball in bounds to Tatum. Tatum launches it over at the buzzer and off the rim and in. I think they're going to take a look at it.
That insane half-court buzzer beater 3 is Landon Tatum. And he's not the guy at all you would expect to be in this situation. And I think it deserves a little bit of perspective. In his career, his entire college career, Tatum only shot 43 threes, of which he only made 18. So it's crazy to think about the fact that when he shot only his 8th three-pointer in his whole collegiate career, he would make a half-court buzzer beater 3. Now, you might think that after hitting that shot, Tatum and Idaho would be destined to win in overtime. However, basketball is cruel. This time, as overtime wound down, Idaho and Wright State found their roles reversed. Wright State has a ball down by a point with only 4 seconds to go. Just like Idaho, they have to go the full length of the floor. Tatum is once again at the center of the play. This time, though, he's a primary defender on what is probably going to be the last play of the game.
The end of the game, off the clock, got it! Oh my! What a game here tonight! Julius Mays!
This isn't right. This isn't how this story was supposed to end. Tatum should have been the hero. This should have been his moment to shine. Instead, that moment was stolen from right underneath him. Tatum can only put up his hands in the air and look to the sky and contemplate, how is this fair? All of Tatum's pain, however, occurred in the background, as meanwhile a young boy attending the game frantically celebrated the win. This boy is probably completely unaware of the tragic human moment that he just witnessed. He will probably go home and tomorrow tell all of his friends about the amazing buzzer beater win he saw. Will he mention the amazing shot that gifted him that moment? The player that made that insane half-court 3? Probably not. In fact, even ESPN forgot about Tatum. When the shot made the top 10 plays of the day, they accidentally credited the shot to Julius Mays.
1.1 seconds left, guess what happened? Julius Mays at the buzzer!
Even on ESPN, Tatum was a forgotten footnote. Today, Tatum is no longer a footnote. He's gone on to have a great career as an assistant coach, and he's currently coaching with the Washington Wizards. I, for one, couldn't be happier for him. In front of you is a graph of the top 20 scorers in 69-69 games. Leading the list is a name some of you might recognize, Shabazz Napier, two-time NCAA champion and NCAA Finals MVP. And he also happens to be the all-time 69-69 points leader by a mile with 120 points. That being said, I do think it is important to note that Napier largely benefited from playing in the most 69-69 games of any player. In fact, in the last decade, his team UConn tied Drake with 7 69-69 games each, leading all of college basketball. I just want to take a moment to recognize this accomplishment and formally reward both schools with these championship banners for having the nicest basketball teams. Please let me know if you want these banners shipped to you. I would be happy to supply them. The player I want to focus on, though, is Geno Crandall. Not only is he number 2 on the scoring list with exactly 69 points, but a 69-69 game literally altered his entire career. Coming out of high school in Minnesota, Gino Crandall was not heavily recruited. He only received a couple offers and ended up deciding to go to the University of North Dakota. Now, the University of North Dakota is far from what you might consider a basketball powerhouse. In fact, they've only been in Division I for a decade, and throughout that time they've been mediocre at best. But with the help of Gino Crandall, they were able to turn things around, and in the 2016-2017 season, they won the Big Sky Conference Championship and made March Madness for the first time in their entire history. Now, the following year is when everything changed for Gino Crandall. It all happened in one basketball game against Gonzaga. On the road, playing the number 12 ranked Gonzaga, Crandall put North Dakota on his back and forced an overtime with this three to tie the game at 69-69. Even though North Dakota went on to lose the game, Crandall caught the eyes of Gonzaga. After the game, Gonzaga's coach Mark Few and players would refer to the game as a Gino Crandall game. And a year later, when Crandall was looking to transfer, Gonzaga, with the game still fresh on their minds, was one of the first schools to call. Crandall would ultimately transfer to Gonzaga. Now, for those that aren't aware, Gonzaga, unlike North Dakota, is a huge college basketball powerhouse. Gonzaga routinely finishes as one of the best schools in the country. That was true once again in 2019. As with Crandall, the Zags finished 30-3 in the regular season. It looked like Gonzaga had a serious chance at making a title run before they ran into Texas Tech in the Elite Eight. Tragically, in his final career game, Crandall sat on the bench and didn't score a single point. However, Gonzaga would score exactly 69 points. Seems like a fitting final score for a guy whose career was so linked to 69-69 games. And no matter what anyone says, Crandall will always be my king of 69, the Duke of Nice. If you are interested in 69-69 games and the data that I was talking about, I've created a website, 69basketballgames.com, where you can look up any of the 180 69-69 basketball games that have happened, which conferences they took place in, and I'll be updating that daily as the season goes on for any new 69-69 games. In addition, I also want to give a shout out to Annalise, whose music I used throughout this video. I've listed the songs below, as well as like a Spotify link. I've also put that in the YouTube description, so you have some great music. Go ahead and check it out. Otherwise, bye.